let's get this party started with our keynote, who I hope will be phenomenal in presenting us with a great way to consider crossing the divide of the unique, individual, and differing viewpoints we all come to today's discussion with. Batter up.
Good morning. My profession is as a teacher, and I'm used to having the students all sit relatively close to one another. So I am going to ask that we all stand up and move at least 5 or so chairs kind of closer together. Here's a challenge. And we all do this in the next 15 seconds. On our marks, get set, go for it. Good. I'm going to try something very dangerous. I'm not going to use the microphone. That's the dangerous thing that I'm going to be doing today. I have a voice. I have a teacher's voice, honed through many years of teacher voicing it up. All right. Thanks all for coming here. Autism is hard to talk about. The riddle for us today, how can we actually talk with one another over wild differences of opinion? At first, we're going to talk a little bit about what we mean when we say autism. Then we're going to talk about why autism is hard to talk about. And then we're going to talk about the magical opportunity that we actually have here today. Okay, so I used to be a history teacher, so I tend to approach things historically. What is autism? On the count of 3, I want you to give me a slider. How much do you feel like you personally understand if you were asked by a child what autism is? So this would be, yeah, I could write a small book about that. And this is, I don't know that word. What am I doing here? I thought this was a dentistry convention. On the count of 3, and this would be, somewhere in the middle. 3, 2, 1, and shoot. Okay, take a look around. A lot of various answers to this question. So just because it's fun to talk about things historically, in the 1930s, a psychiatrist named Leo Kanner, working, I believe, in the United States, worked with a population of kids who were mostly nonverbal or subverbal and who seemed locked inside of themselves. The word autism had been invented 30 years earlier, but not for any particularly good use. And so he commandeered this word autism from the Greek autos, meaning the self, meaning alone. An automobile is like a self-driven taxi cab, what's the word? Horse-drawn cart, but it drives itself, right? So you get the idea that the self alone for this. At about the same time in Austria, we had Hans Asperger, who was working with what turned out to be a somewhat different population of kids, typically kids who were children of the intellectual elite. And he talked about these kids. These kids could talk. In fact, honestly, these kids' problems were more on the line of they were not able to shut up. They used these very oddly adult phrases, and they had these odd sort of prosodies, these odd sort of patterns of speaking. He called them his little professors. It's always, I said this to the father of a son with autism, it's always difficult to talk in general about autism. And so I decided to take on the personas of both of these august psychiatrists and write a poem from their vantage point about the kids that they work with. And when I say write a poem, I mean ask ChatGPT to write a poem for me. And so here is what we think maybe Anna might have written. Rooms of silence, walls we cannot scale, 11 children spin a hidden tale. Eyes like deep wells, yet vacant of rapport, lost in a world with a different kind of lore. Repetition is their sacred chant, a language of loops for wants and can'ts. Their hands flap wings that never take to sky, bound to the earth, yet forever asking why. Averse to touch, they walk a solo track. In echoed words, they send our questions back. Amidst the chaos, they crave a structured dance. In their own minds, they find their only chance. Based on your personal experiences with autism, perhaps you love this, perhaps you hate this, just blame ChatGPT. And then I had ChatGPT did the same thing, but for Asperger and the population of kids with whom he worked. In corridors of numbers, maps, and stars, little professors, it's a famous phrase for the kids he worked with, little professors ponder from afar. They speak in codes and facts devoid of guise, yet stumble on the lexicon of size. Drawn to the arcane, experts in the small, they master realms where others barely crawl. But in the dance of glances, smiles, and jest, they miss the steps, put social grace to test. With focus like a laser, sharp and keen, they see the world in ways it's rarely seen, yet fail to read the subtle, silent cues in the unwritten script that others use. For a long time, the American Anglophone Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the Bible of psychiatry, listed only autism as a diagnosis. In 1994, with the publication of the DSM version 4, Asperger's syndrome was added as a separate diagnosis. It stayed in there until 2013 with the publication of the DSM-5, when these things were together. Autism spectrum disorder. The notion behind the word spectrum is that they recognize that these things, they feel like they're parts of the same thing. They feel like sometimes you'd have kids who would go into one clinic and they get diagnosed with autism, but they walk into another clinic and they get diagnosed with Asperger's. And people realize, oh, there's something up here. These are connected in some sort of deeper way. That is the notion behind autism spectrum disorder. So I happen to have here my personal desk reference, the DSM-5. Does anybody have one of these? Thumbs up, thumbs down, 3, 2, 1, shoot. They're surprisingly expensive, right? So we could look in here and read it's only like 2.5 pages for this. Don't worry. Don't worry. We're definitely not going to do that. Even 2.5 pages, the words are small. It's fairly long. What this diagnosis basically comes down to is 3 things. Difficulties in social interaction. I see people nodding. Repetitious behavior, repetitious speech, and inflexible behavior, needing to have things just right. Okay, so we've collapsed this down. These are among the 3 essential aspects of what is required to get a diagnosis. But of course, there are more things than this too. So I want to play a game. Both more things that make it into DSM-5 and more things that make it into just what everyone who has had an autistic kid recognizes as autistic behavior. So we're going to play a game. The game is called More or Less. I'm going to name a behavior or a trait, and I want you to guess whether kids who are on the spectrum exhibit this more or less than other kids. Does this idea make sense? Sensitivity to touch, more or less? Nope. Didn't wait for them. Turns out that one of the things that brains are really good at is following along to what other brains are doing. And so what I like to do with this is have a 3, 2, 1, just because otherwise your brain is going to be looking at what are the cool people in the room saying? What is going on here? And not thinking for yourself. So on the count of 3, sensitivity to touch, more or less for kids on the spectrum. 3, 2, 1, shoot. More is the answer. Sensitivity to sound. 3, 2, 1, shoot. More is the answer. Sensitivity to smell. 3, 2, 1, shoot is the answer. Literalness in language. Second. Literalness in language. Thanks. How literal they are. Can anyone give a good example of this? I should have thought of one. Just to repeat that for our listening audience at home, when we ask what time it is and our autistic kid says, it says, oh, sorry, we're asked, what time is it? It's 3:30. No, it's not. It's 3:28. To which a fun response is 3:28 in how many seconds? And they say that 328 how many milliseconds, right? It's fun to try to press the literalness to the human limit. Literalness in language, more or less. 3, 2, 1, and shoot. Up is the answer for that. How easy, I guess, ease of being overwhelmed. Easier to overwhelm a kid on the spectrum, less easy. 3, 2, 1, shoot. Holy glory and glory. Up. Comfort with lying. With telling lies. 3, 2, 1, shoot. Let the record show that almost everyone in the room, everyone is different, kids are different, but almost everyone in the room is straight down and people are even shaking their heads. This is, what the heck is the connection between lying and sensory sensitivity? Isn't that weird? Doesn't this seem to defy any intuitive connection that you give these things? Eye contact. More or less? 3, 2, 1, shoot. The classic thing to say here is less. But it's not 100% even in this room for this. That's important. Don't think that this necessarily makes your kid, quote, less autistic than other kids, right? People are different and there are all sorts of traits that are bundled together in these wonderful little gift boxes that are our children. Pickiness in eating. 3, 2, 1, shoot. And up and in general and oftentimes pathological. Stomach aches. 3, 2, 1, shoot. More in general. And finally, interests. More broad, interested in everything. Or thumbs down, more specific, narrow. 3, 2, 1, shoot. Different answers here, but typically down for that. Okay, so why is autism so hard to talk about? How can we talk with each other over wild differences of opinion? Everything that I just said is kind of a hint for this. Don't share your guesses yet, but I want us to imagine that autism is an island, that small island down there, and it's surrounded by 2 bigger islands. And the people on the island on that side say that autism is a disorder. And the people who are on the island on that side say that autism is a strength. Imagine that you visit both of these islands and you hear people saying some phrases and you note that the phrases that they use are very different from each other. So I'm going to throw out a phrase, a description, a sentence that someone on these islands might say, and I want you to point this way if you think that the people on that island, the disorder island, would say that, and this way if you think that it's the strength island. Sorry, that's confusing. Let me just say, people who say get treatment. Is that phrase going to be heard more on the island that says that autism is a disorder, or the island that says that it's a strength? Get treatment for autism. 3, 2, 1, shoot. And the answer is going to be disorder. Get support. 3, 2, 1, shoot. Stand that way. What are the symptoms? 3, 2, 1, shoot. Very medicalized. What are the traits? 3, 2, 1, shoot. A phrase that comes from talking about normal human variation. The phrase high functioning or low functioning. 3, 2, 1, shoot. Classically, though people differ in this, with the side that tends to use the metaphor of disorder. People who, the phrase high, that they need high support or lower levels of support. 3, 2, 1, shoot. The phrase autism spectrum disorder. 3, 2, 1, shoot. Note that this is also the official DSM thing. It changes all the time, but that is what it is. Autism spectrum condition. 3, 2, 1, shoot. Tends to be the strength side. Person with autism, as opposed to autistic person. Got some big kind of confused deer in headlights eyes here. 3, 2, so I'll just say person with autism. 3, 2, 1, shoot. Tends to be the strength side. Person first language is the phrase that's used for this. Autistic person. 3, 2, 1, shoot. Tends to be the disorder side. One of the explanations I've heard from that side is to say that I may be a person with a remote control in my hand, but I'm not a person with skin. Skin is not a thing that I can easily drop from myself. A remote control is something that I can drop. To say autistic person is more true, the argument on this side goes to the nature of the case, because this is an essential part of somebody's nature. Okay, so what does this island, the disorder island, want? Cure? Any other words? Mainstream? Normal? Make them normal? What does this side, the strength side, want? Embrace them for who they are, acceptance. What I put for this, and I'm sure we can come up with better ways for this, find new ways to reduce suffering, help society become more accepting. And I bring this back to the question again. No, sorry, not this question. The extra riddle here. How can we have good conversations across wild differences? And now I want to take us to what is the magical opportunity that we have here today. So I want to ask this honestly. Feel free to give your most honest thumb to there's a surprising amount of information that one can communicate with a thumb, huh? To what extent do you have a side in this? Or at least you find yourself in one of these two islands? Thumbs up would be, wow, yeah, I am definitely a resident of one of these two islands. Thumbs down would be like, I know, like I do not, I'm not on really one of these sides at all. 3, 2, 1, shoot. So take a look around, a big variety of answers. Some people yes, some people no. And now if I had to ask, which of these two islands would you feel like you are more yourself on? Thumbs down is going to be disorder, not because it's bad or whatever, but because it's the first one we talked about, and also it starts with the letter D. Disorder, and thumbs up would be strengths. Middle would be middle. 3, 2, 1. Wild differences in the answers here. Imagine two of these people from these islands coming together in canoes and trying to talk with one another about the people on this third island, the small island in the middle. How many sentences are they going to be able to get past before people start swinging canoe paddles at each other? All of the words that we use to talk about autism spectrum disorder, including autism spectrum disorder, are fighting words. This is the situation in which we find ourselves. We have created hell for ourselves. So it's hard to talk with somebody at an inclusive group like this without fearing that this person is ignorant at best and deluded and perhaps awful at worst. I don't know if anybody has ever Googled the word autism before, but this is very quickly what one comes to when one Googles this. Yet, I think there is a magic opportunity that we have here today. I want to zoom in to the one island that we haven't been talking most about. I want to talk about the island with all of our kids with autism, or autistic kids, whichever way you want to say it. I wanted to put together some objective numbers that I thought would be really helpful for all of us. The percentage of kids who have been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. These numbers are accurate to about 8 years ago, just so you know, and every study is going to find something different I relied only on studies that I could find that were replicated and seemed to produce good things. But that said, I'm sure we could find some slight tweaks on these numbers. Kids on the spectrum with epilepsy is 30%. Kids on the spectrum with cognitive disabilities, half of them. Tourette's, 3 times the risk of other kids. Cerebral palsy, 5 times. Tuberous sclerosis, very rare, very rare. It's when your body develops benign tumors in all sorts of interesting places. 100 times the risk. Half of kids who are diagnosed on the spectrum self-injure. More than half exhibit physical aggression in excess of what other kids who are not on the spectrum exhibit. 2/3 have sleep disorders. Sleep disorders perhaps sounds mild. It is a euphemism oftentimes for some very, very icky things. Eating problems, 3/4. The percentage of kids with autism, and I think this is actually specific to Asperger's, who, when asked in a survey, said that they had a friend, was about 50%. The percent of kids who have Asperger's, who had made specific plans for suicide or attempted them, was 1/3. How can we talk with each other over wild differences of opinion? We talk to each other here. When you meet someone new and you don't know, oh no, which island are they on? How are they going to talk about this? Do I have to police my language? Have to police their language? So easy, because we have these social brains that are designed to emulate each other and to fight with people for a cause that we think is just. It's so easy to fall into seeing other parents who disagree with us as ignorant at best, as deluded, and perhaps evil at worst. Remember that the person to whom you are speaking is someone who has witnessed suffering just like you, who has suffered just like you. This is the thing that connects us. This is the thing that brings us here together. We're not here to fight. We're here to help our kids. These islands, they sit on different sides of the islands with our kids on them. They see our kids from different perspectives. This is something that we don't have an opportunity to do online, to talk with people who disagree with us, and to see the world, see our kids through their vantage point. We come here looking for new ideas, new ways of reaching and helping our kids. The only way that we're going to get that is by finding people who have a different perspective on this than we do. I encourage you, don't be a loner here. When you run across somebody else in another workshop, when you talk to somebody passing in the hall, feel free to ask them the magic words. What brings you here? And get ready to listen to their answer. Thanks for coming to this.